الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Continuing our reading of the Manzuma, the poem Al-Adab Al-Shar'iyya, Manzumat Al-Adab Al-Shar'iyya Al-Sughra, the minor poem on the Islamic legislative etiquette. We stopped on line number 151, where the author, rahimahullah, Ibn Abdul Qaadir Al-Hanbali, rahimahullah, was speaking about the rulings on clothing. So he's going to continue talking about the ruling on clothing. Last week we spoke about the ruling for men wearing gold and silver or gold and silk, the ruling for men pertaining to the type of kind of clothing which is allowed. So the Shaykh's going to continue on that. He says, rahimahullah, ويحرم ستر أو لباس الفتى الذي حوى صورة للحي في النص أحمدي. He says it is haram, unlawful, for a young man to cover himself or wear that which contains a picture of a living being according to a text from Imam Ahmad. So here the author is speaking about the ruling on wearing clothing that has pictures. And we've covered this before, so we don't have to repeat it. But we said, in Islam, wearing clothing which has a picture, the correct opinion is haram. We did mention some of the scholars hold the view that if you have a shirt, a sweater, a t-shirt that has a picture of a living being, an animal, a human, or something like this, some of the ulama, some of our scholars said it's only disliked. And we looked at their evidences, and we looked at the second opinion, which is haram. This is not permissible, because of the general hadith about the impermissibility of having pictures in the home. And we explained the hadith, إِلَّا رَقْمًا فِي الثَّوْبِ. The only permission the Prophet ﷺ gave for a garment is if it is one that is on the ground, that is going to be walked on, or if it's on the blankets. Those ones are exempted. But on the shirt, not permissible. And so if you go back to that lesson, we explained this. So the author kind of repeated himself, so we're not going to go into it more, but we understand that. Then the author says in line 152, وَفِي السِّتْرِ أَوْ مَا هُوَ مَذِنَّةُ بَذْلَةٍ لِيُكْرَهُ كَتْبٌ لِلْقُرْآنِ الْمُمَجَّدِ. So he says now, it is disliked to write the Qur'an, the noble Qur'an, on a screen or a veil or a curtain or whatever can be debased or humiliated. So what is the author talking about here? The ruling on writing the Qur'an on a curtain, on a wall, or anything that can potentially be humiliated. For example, you write some ayat on a poster on the wall, then it falls down and people walk over it. Or you have a curtain, it has the Qur'an on it, and then later on, right, somebody pulls it down or it comes down and then it gets debased. This is haram. This is what he's trying to say. It's haram to do this. But he doesn't say haram himself. He says, liyukrahu is disliked. And this seems to be more correct, that it's only disliked because of the potentiality of that happening. It's not haram. If it's haram for sure, it's going to be on the floor and someone's going to walk on it. But if you hang it, it's a wasila to that. It's a means. It's not actually going to lead to it necessarily. So there's some narrations from Imam Ahmad rahimahullah that he didn't allow this. So some of his students, Al-Mardaawi, he says, I asked Imam Ahmad, Abu Abdullah, an sitri, on about a screen or a curtain, يُكْتَبُ عَلَيْهِ القرآن, a curtain in which the Qur'an has been written. فَكَرَهَ ذَلك, he disliked it. وَقَالَ لَا يُكْتَبُ الْقُرْآنُ عَلَى شَيْءٍ مَنْصُوبٍ وَلَا سِتْرٍ وَلَا غَيْرِهِ. And he said, you should not write the Qur'an on anything which will be hung up, whether it be a curtain or other than it. And this is the correct opinion of many of our contemporary scholars. When it comes to the book of Allah, you should not write the Qur'an on the wall, a curtain, a veil, anything like this, out of fear that later it will fall and it will be humiliated, or it will be debased, or someone will not give it due right. Not to mention that the Qur'an wasn't revealed to be decoration. وَمَا هُوَ بِالْهَزْلِ. And the Qur'an is not an amusement, it's not a zina, It's not something you hang up, it's something to recite, something to reflect on and ponder. So this is a mistake that we find many times in people's homes. They have the Quran above them or written on the walls, and the book of Allah is not respected. Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah gave the example, maybe someone has ayat on the wall. وَلَا يَغْتَبْ بَعْدُكُمْ بَعْضًا. None of you should backbite one another, and in the sitting everyone's backbiting. The ayah is saying don't do it, and in the gathering all we're doing is backbiting. And other such amazing kind of situation, the Quran is more respected than that. Means you shouldn't do that. The Quran is not a decoration. Some ahadith have come showing the signs of the judgment that we're going to beautify the masahif, the actual copies of the Quran with gold and silver. So all of this shows the Quran is not for adornment and zina. However, what about if you have dhikrullah? Not the Quran, some dhikr, dua. Can I put that on my wall? Some people when they design, a space, they want to put some dhikr on the wall, other than the Quran. So if it's other than the Quran, the scholars divided between the Quran and other than the Quran. They made a tafriq, differentiation. So before we continue, what about the Quran itself on other than a wall? For example, if I hang it on a poster, same thing, you shouldn't do it. If you have the Quran on those big lawhat, those kind of big, many of us we have it in a home, or someone gifted us big kind of plasters. That's also part of it. The Shafi'i and the Hanafi, all of them, they tell the view is dislike to write it on anything. For example, a random wall, put an ayah, because of the potential that someone will humiliate it. And when it comes to other than the Quran, then the scholars say, فَلَا بَأْسَ بِهَا. There's no harm in that. And the reason why is they say that the Quran is the book of Allah and the speech of Allah. It has the utmost respect. As for something other than it, it should be respected, but then that one we can take a look at the purpose. So if someone will say, if I put the Quran on the wall, I'm trying to be reminded. But that's not how we do it. Sahaba never did this. So Shaykh Uthaymin actually said that even from the angle that if you put it in the masajid, it's disliked. If you put it at homes, he said it's even become innovation. Bid'ah, he said, because this is how the Quran is supposed to be reminding you. وَذَكِّرْ بِالْقُرْآنِ Allah says, فَذَكِّرْ, remind the people. But how do you remind them? By reminding them by reading it. So from the angle that if you wanted to have it there as a reminder, then don't do the Quran, put anything else. But how do you do other things? So let's look at what the ulama they mention. Shaykh Ibn Baz rahimahullah, he mentions if a person hangs something like the dhikr of Allah or good statements, MashaAllah, Tabarakallah, or the dhikr, or something like this on the wall, or mathal. If a person hangs it for beneficial purpose so they can be reminded, and some of them say even the ahadith Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam comes from this angle, you can. But it has to be, the intent is as a reminder for the people, or just something to remind people about good, or to have it there as a reminder for yourself. Shaykh Salih al-Shaykh also, he mentioned about using or putting MashaAllah, right? Or putting Tabarakallah or other things on the wall. He says if the qasd and the intention is to be reminded of something mashru', like for example, someone sees something like many du'as to say MashaAllah or something like that, reminds you not to forget Allah's bounty, that's okay. But it says if the intention is to protect you, like an amulet, that's haram now. So sometimes people, what they do, they put the Quran on the wall, it's going to keep the house safe. You see, now it's tawheed issue. It goes that far. Some people do it for zina, some people do it for like a tiwala, it's actually supposed to be amulet. This is bab of shirk now. We're going towards things which are not allowed. Even though the Quran, we know, it's not from the shirk, but it's not the way. It's not allowed to do that either. But what about if you put other things? So this is what the ulama say, it goes down to the purpose. But if you want to summarize everything that's been said, if it's other than the Quran, like the hadith or dua or adhkar, it is permissible to hang on the wall with the intention of being reminded only. That's okay. Shaykh Uthaymin Liqa Bab Maftuh, he also, one fatwa he passed, he said, as for the hadith, يكون فيه فائدة, if it's a hadith that has benefit, like putting the kafarat majlis, Subhanakallah bihamdik on the wall, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk, he says it's good. Because when you finish the gathering, you see it, you do it. It's from this angle. So this is what the ulama they say. But in our society, in our masajid as well, we have this common practice of writing the ayat on the maharib, the mihrab, like many masjids in the front of the qibla, there's a mihrab. And as you can see, in our masjid there's no mihrab. Some may say, where's the mihrab? Well, the sunnah is not the mihrab. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, his masjid didn't have one. Right? The small little, like dome-shaped thing where the imam goes. So now they put the ayat around it. So this is not a good practice. Even you find some of the masajid that ascribe themselves to the Ahnaf themselves say it's makruh. Ibn Nujaym and Ibn Abidin, these are big scholars in the Hanafi madhab, they say it's not allowed, disliked. Because in the masjid, if you have any ayat on the wall, somebody's praying salah, where is he looking? And you find today that that's another problem. So we should avoid it in our houses to hang the Quran like this or in the masajid. And if someone were to put anything, it's only in the houses. It will be dhikr, we said, or hadith, or good statements. And someone may ask, what about if I want to put it something else? Like I want to hang a picture. If it's a picture of something with no soul, it's permissible to hang on your wall. Like an ocean or tree or something like this, landscape. Because some people, they're design oriented, they want to hang something on the wall in the living room. That's okay. But we should be careful that we start making our houses where we're writing things on the wall and we're putting these things, and then what happens is instead of it's a hujjah for us, it's a hujjah against us. Means you're putting all these remembrances in the wall and there's no reminder. So we have to be mindful of as well. طيب, with all that being said, one more last thing. What about if you put it in English versus Arabic? At the end it's the same thing. Right? It's the same thing. It comes down to the intent of it, and what if it's not the Quran, then it can be done. And we also should be careful to know that some of the designs that people put on the wall, sometimes they have the ayat or the hadith in a form that is not the most befitting. For example, you have the ayah in the shape of a man. This is not how the ayat should be written. The ulama, they criticize that. Or you have something, for example, it has the Quran written calligraphy, but it's in shape as something, like an animal or something. This is not how it should be done. It can have a design, but it has to be also in a way that's respectful. Okay, with all that being said, the author in the next line, he clarified what we just said, which is وَلَيْسَ بِمَكْرُوهٍ كِتَابَةُ غَيْرِهِ مِنَ الذِّكْرِ فِي مَا لَمْ يُدَسْ وَيُمَهَّدِ. So if it's not the Quran, then it's not disliked to write any other form of dhikr on the wall or on the curtain, on those things, as long as it's not being humiliated or debased. And that's the illah they keep mentioning, that there's no fear of it's going to fall down, or someone's going to walk on it, or someone's going to humiliate it. The question here asks about the blankets which have living things on them. Does include cartoons with eyes and like this. So we said that the images on the blankets, this is permissible in Islam. Right? Usually because this is what it said, the hadith, إِلَّا رَقْمًا فِي الثَّوْبِ. So even images of things that are like a cartoonish for the kids or other things like this, it can be exempted from that hadith. Because those things are being debased. You're sleeping on it, you're rolling it over, you're throwing it on the floor. So from those angles. But obviously, we should try our best to avoid any kind of image in which we fear that it will also not be a good tarbiyah for the children. We're going to get to that topic a little later. But in general, when it comes to blankets, if it's an image on it, it's permissible, exempted, because it's being rolled on, stepped on like this. That's what the illa raqman fi thawb means. But when it comes to the cartoons, we're going to get to that later, or something similar to it. Line 154 now, the author, he moves to a topic related to this topic. He says, وَحَلَّ لِمَنْ يَسْتَأْجِرُ الْبَيْتَ حَقُّهُ التَّسَاوِيرَ كَالْحَمَّامِ لِلدَّاخِلِ إِشْهَدِ. So he says, it is permissible for the one who rents a house to scratch off or erase any pictures found on the wall, just like the one who enters a public bath is allowed to do that. So now the Shaykh mentioned two things that come together. Number one, you rented a house, or you're renting a house, or you rented a room, and inside that room is pictures. Or you entered into public space, at that time the hammam is the public sauna, and you found pictures on the wall, statues or pictures. He's saying you can scratch it off, you can take it down, because you're not supposed to have that in Islam. But obviously we understand from there comes another issue, which is, what about if it's outside my control? I'm just a tenant, I'm not the landlord. Can I go and take it down? Or somebody enters into public gathering or public space, and you know you don't have authority. You go and you tear it down, and then you get into vandalism or something. You get arrested or you get charged. So in Islam, this goes back to the topic we mentioned a long time ago. Ordering the good and forbidding the evil. This qawa'id, rules, same rules apply. If you don't have authority, you can't do it. You have to remember that. You can't go, for example, you rent an Airbnb and you start tearing down the wallpaper. I don't think anyone is going to do that. But the point is, what about if I rented an Airbnb, there's pictures on the wall? This is the most mas'ala. It's actually a good question. Because some of these spaces, they have wallpaper or images, especially if you're renting a big villa or something, or a condo, they could have artwork that has images on it. So the ulama, they talk about it. His opinion, Ibn Abdul Qawwi, is that you can take it off. Because obviously the context is talking about the Muslim world, in the Muslim lands, and also that this is something haram, munkar, everyone has to engage in it. But some of the fuqaha, they made conditions. And they said that, obviously, we know, if it creates a bigger munkar, or greater evil, then it's haram to do that too. وَأَوْلَا تَرْكُهُ, leave it alone. وَسَقَطَ أَمْرُ عَنْهُ, he's not commanded to do it. For example, you rented a hotel room, you didn't know, you walk in, there's a big picture. I already paid, or already checked in, what do I do now? So some things you could obviously do is maybe you take it down, put the picture down if it's not going to break it or harm it, or you put something on top of it. Or if you can't do any of that, you leave it alone, you sleep. And later you check out. There's no sin then. Because they said that if the taghir munkar, if you're changing, it leads to a greater munkar, Islam doesn't teach us that. Another thing would be then, what about renting an aslan? What's the order of renting a space in to begin with? And this opens a door in the chapter Mu'amalat in Islam, that there's ahkam when it comes to renting, rulings about renting. And one of the things about renting is, what kind of spaces can you rent? So one of the things that some of the fuqaha they spoke about, should I rent that space to begin with? They have a khilaf. Right? So Al-Mardaawi, when the ulama and Hanabil, he mentions both views in that madhab, the Hanbali madhab, and also outside of it. And so one opinion is that you can't. It's haram, because you know it's already there, and you're going in there, and you're just enjoying that space. Second opinion is that there's no harm on you for it. But the safest thing is to get out the fitna and the khilaf. If you're renting a space and you already know there's lots of pictures in there, then you wouldn't rent that space. You get one that doesn't have those kind of things. And this goes without saying, but it's an interesting benefit because you may come across this in your own life. You went to a place, you went there, and there's images. And then next issue comes, can I pray in there? Right? Someone will say, how my salah? Should I face away from it? So what do I do? And all of these things teach us that at the end of the day, alhamdulillah, Islam comes to explain these issues. They're not left to us in the dark. But the benefit is, if there's any kind of images there, you don't have the authority to take it down, number one. And it's going to lead to a munkar greater than it. Number two, and we know at the same time that these kind of things, as Muslims here, we can only advise, because you're the tenant, you're not the landlord. Or, for example, some say you can cover it in a way that you're not going to harm it. For example, if you're actually renting for a long-term space, you can cover it maybe, and the landlord will have no problem with that. And later on, you can just take it down or take down the image. And if you're not doubtful, you can ask permission. Can I take this down? Or can I replace it with something? So this is a benefit that the Shaykh was getting to, but obviously we put it in its context. Because if someone listens to this, and they don't know those conditions we mentioned before, they're going to go and they're going to start breaking things and start tearing things down. That's not allowed in Islam. In line 155, the author now he moves into a topic about buying and selling toys. And this is in relation to the children's toys. He says, rahimahullah, وَحَلَّ شِرَاءَ الْوَالِي الْيَتِيمَةِ لُعْبَةً بِلَا رَأْسٍ إِن تَطْلُبْ وَبِالرَّأْسِ فَاسْجُدِي. He says it is permissible for the guardian of an orphan girl. We know orphans, when they're underneath the age of puberty, they have a wali, or a guardian, someone looking after them. So in Islam, what's an orphan? It's a man and woman, male or female, who's underneath the age of puberty, whose father has passed away. Not both. In this culture, it's both, right? In Islam, your father passed away, and you're underneath the age of puberty, male or female, you're a yatim, or a yatima. You're considered an orphan. So the hukm lasts until the age of maturity. When you reach maturity, you're not an orphan anymore. And at the same time, at that time, if they have wealth or inheritance given, or all these things, they have a guardian who's overwatching them. So here the Shaykh is saying that the guardian who's watching over your wealth, right, for a team, or in this case a team, a young orphan girl, he has to buy for her something like toys. Right? For children, the toys is allowed. Right? And the key, the ulama mentioned, always for the children. Because naturally, adults are not supposed to be playing with toys. It goes without saying. But obviously, in our time today, things are different. So he's saying here that the ruling For the young girl, the wali, the guardian can buy her toys. But then he puts a condition, stipulation. He says, bila ra'sin. It should be a toy that doesn't have any head on it. Now this is an interesting issue that fuqaha, they went into in Islam about the rules of what kind of toys children can play with and which they can't. And he says if she, the young girl, requests a toy which has a head, then he should prevent it. And now this issue comes now. What is the mas'ala that the Imam is talking about? So he's dealing with the issue that many of the fuqaha, all four madhahib and also past and present fuqaha, they dealt with. In Islam, we know picture making and idol making is haram. But in Islam, at the same time, permits children to play with toys. This is important. Islam permits children to play with toys, and it has lightened, or you can say made some takhfif, some kind of lessening of the permission to use images for children, for educational purposes, and by extension, creative purposes like in terms of play. So toys, pictures on their books or their material they use, etc., etc. But from the ideas of the general ruling of the tahrim of pictures came a specific permissibility, which is of toys. But now, when the ulama mentioned the exemption, and there's proofs for the exemption, what is being exempted? That's the question. So if we go to the Mawsu' al-Fiqhiyya Kuwaitiyya, I'll read some of the aqwal ulama. The asl is that jumhur ulama, this is a majority. They say that making toys for children to play with is permissible. And the prohibition we mentioned about picture making, that has made some kind of allowance. يُرَخِّص لِلصِّغَارِ الْبَنَاتِ. It's been permissible for the young girls. And why the girls and not the boys? That's a khilaf too. The correct opinion is that girls and boys can both play with toys when they're young. But the essence, the fuqaha, they always speak about the banat, the girls. And they speak about the dolls, specifically. And the wisdom behind it, they say that the origin for proof for permissibility for toys and dolls for girls is the aspect tarbiyah. Because the girls, if she has a little doll, she learns how to take care of it, to keep it safe, put it to sleep, wake it up, all those kind of things that do with motherhood. It's old-fashioned tarbiyah, right? Until today, people do it. And it's almost innate, if you be honest. Why with daughters that they like these kind of things? So the ulama, they say this is a permission because Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha used to have dolls. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam saw it and he made taqreer, he made approval of it. Alayhi salatu wasalam. Hadith, there's many hadith. One of them, Bukhari and Muslim, Aisha mentioned that she used to have the dolls in her house. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam used to invite her friends over to play. But other hadith mentioned that she used to have certain dolls like a horse with two wings. And she said, this is the horse of which prophet? And Prophet Sulaymaan alayhi salatu wasalam. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam smiled when he heard that. In taqreer, right? Taqreer Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam means al-ibaha. The Prophet confirms anything, approval, it points to permissibility. And other evidences to show that she used to play with dolls and he didn't prohibit her. Now, this exemption for the dolls, for the girls, because they said to teach them the tarbiyah and how to raise the children and take care of these things. And this is naturally something which the girls, they incline to. And then the ulama, they went into what about the boys? Right? Because naturally boys, they can play other games. Right? They don't need a doll or a toy. They can play with the ball. They can play amongst each other. But the correct opinion is jawaz, even permissible for the boys to have those toys. And hadith sahihain, the hadith of Rubayyah bint Mu'awwadh al-Ansariya, she mentions that the day of Arafah, it was Ashura, if I remember correctly, it was Ashura, they used to fast. And when they're fasting this day, the kids are fasting with them. And when the kids are fasting with them, they're getting hungry. Ashura, the kids are fasting, they're teaching them how to do fast. Imagine, Sahaba, the tarbiyah that they had to teach the kids to fast, the volunteer fast. What about then the fard? Of course, the scholars discuss when do you start fast for kids? Right? The safest view would be then whenever they're able to, whenever they're capable of doing it. But imagine how the tarbiyah of the Sahaba, this is very interesting insight. They didn't start with the fard. Fard they would do, but they used to also do the voluntary fasts to teach the kids how to fast. So it's very important for our community that children learn young. You start with the voluntary, fard, the voluntary, do more than just that so the kids, it becomes easy for them. But naturally, the children are young, they get hungry. So she said whenever the kids got hungry, they would give them some toys made of wool, and they will play with it or get distracted with it until the iftar time. And who are these? This is Sibyan, the boys. So this is a correct view. Then even the little boys can play with some kind of doll, or not a doll like the girl's doll, but some kind of toy. This hadith in Bukhari and Muslim. So from here, the boys and girls have been given permission. And the ulama specified children, and they always mention duna bulugh, and they need the age of puberty. Because when you reach the age of puberty, you should not play with toys anymore. You're a man or a woman. You should be doing things that are more serious. You can do sports, but when it comes to the toys. So if we understand this, the question that came now with the fuqaha they looked into, what kind of toys are these? So remember the hadith we mentioned, the Prophet ﷺ prohibited pictures in general. And then now there is a specific evidence that children can play with toys. Is this specification for the toys, for the kids, general permission? So picture all kinds of dolls, with heads and full details, or is it kind of guided? For example, we have different types of dolls. Rag dolls versus the dolls you have to the figurines that look like exactly like humans. So some of the fuqaha, when they looked into this, they said that Aisha used to have like what was considered rag dolls, like this. The facial features of the animal is not clear. Some ulama said there wasn't even a head. And as you see here, the fuqaha, Mawsu' al-Fiqhiyya, volume 12, page 121, it says this is the opinion of the Hanabila, and he's a Hanbali, Ibn Abdul-Qawwi. So that's why he mentioned bila ra'sin, because the Hanabila held the view, it must be a toy with no head. Because of surah al-ras, فَإِذَا قُطِعَ الرَّأْسِ فَلَا الصُّورَةِ. Because the picture, in according to Sharia, is that which has a head. So if it doesn't have a head, it's not a picture. So it says, وَإِنْفَرَدَ الْحَنَابِلَ بِاشْتِرَاطِ أَن تَكُونَ الْلُعْبَةُ الْمُصَوَّرَ بِلَا رَأْسِ. That the Hanabila held the view that in the stipulation, the toy must be one with no head. Why? Because they said the hadith prohibits that. So you don't put it, therefore it's not. Whereas the other madhahib, they held the view that it's allowed in general, even with the head. Then there also became the difficulty, which is how detailed can the picture or the image be? Because someone will say, I don't understand the issue. Why are the ulama having differences about the details of the image? If you have an image that looks very detailed, like a toy soldier or a doll, details looking exactly like a human being, it resembles idol. That's the mushkila now. In Islam, can we have idols in our home? Even someone will say, but it's idol which is permissible. Is there such? This is what the khilaf is. You have to have that tasawwur, what the ulama were debating. Imam, some of the fuqaha, when they talked about it, they specifically mentioned this. Ahkam al-Sultaniyya, for example, in there, it's mentioned that when it comes to ordering good and prohibiting evil, it's one of the discussions to take a look at the image, the toy. Is it idol or not? This is what they're debating. And so now you can see why the fuqaha were concerned. They were not trying to, some people may think the ulama are worried about the children having fun. They're not worried about this. They're trying to make sure it's not displeasing to Allah. So at the end, Imam Ibn Abdul Qaadir is a Hanbali. So because of this, he held the view that you can buy the toy, but it should not have a head. But the other madhabs will allow that. And some of our contemporary scholars say that it should be not so detailed, like an actual looks like an idol. And some of them are more lenient or more general. They don't put the specifications. The point is, our parents should also take their precaution. Obviously, there's many toys that you can buy. And obviously, the benefit behind all of this is to ensure that our homes become place pleasing to Allah. Because if we say there is an exemption for the kids based on the Quran and Sunnah, the question should come, is this what the Sahaba and Salaf did? And is this the Fahm Salaf? Because we don't want to say the Salaf did it and we do it our own way. Aisha had toys, but is it like ours, so detailed? Or is it something which is being more broad? And we also remind ourselves of the hadith in Bukhari Muslim, the angels don't enter the house where there's a picture or a dog. So we have to be careful that we don't open the door to the point that we don't have any concern. Lastly, some of the fuqaha raised a point that even if we say that it's okay to have toys in general, we don't want to be too strict, we have to be careful tarbiyah. The tarbiyah behind these toys, a Barbie figurine, what exactly is he teaching the daughters? To wear hijab? Well, it's a good question. Or sometimes you have superheroes and he's wearing underwear. What is he telling our children? Mashallah, he's very strong, but why is he not wearing any proper, he's not covering his awrah? And we laugh. When you think about what the child is learning, we don't realize it till later. These are things that are idealized. And today, in our society, we're critiquing them. So the child, when they're young, we should also give them toys. Alhamdulillah, there's a Muslim market now for toys, where you can get dolls will have hijab. Yes, there are such. There are rag dolls with no faces even. And so all of these opportunities we should support, because at the end of the day, these things are much more safer, right, for the children. And also it helps better explain our mindset as Muslims, our beliefs and our methodology. So the question says, is it okay if the head of the doll is covered from the neck with a cloth? So the idea is that their opinion, the Hanbalis, then if the head should be removed. Or if it's there, right, it should be kind of like some way covered to the point it doesn't have one. But like we said, the other madhahib allowed it, so we try our best to find the toys where there's no, if it even has a head, it doesn't have clear face or features. And like I said, if you look around, there's many handmade dolls, alhamdulillah, that remove this. But this is a benefit to show that what the fuqaha are worried about is about the pleasure of Allah, but at the same time allowing the kids to have something which they can play with. And then the author says, connected to this, وَلَا تَشْتَرِي مَا كَانَ مِنْ ذَلِكَ سُورَةٍ سُورَةٍ وَمِنَ الْمَالِهِ مَا لَا مِنْ مَالِهَا فِي الْمُجَوَّدِ. He says then, if he's going to buy her, i.e. the young girl, a toy, let him buy one from his wealth, the guardian's wealth, not the wealth of the orphan. It's just like a kind of generosity. He's going to buy from his wealth. Even though he's allowed to use her wealth, it's important. The guardian, when he's taking care of the orphan, he can use their wealth to take care of them, upkeep. And he can take some of that wealth for his own self if he needs it. Again, it has to be ma'roof. It can only be a certain amount, like what's customary except the reasonable. So, but the author is saying that he should buy from his own wealth, according to one of the views of the Hanbalis, as a kind of honor, just not to spend her money on it, whatever toy it is. But the point is, even in Islam, there's huquq for the orphans. We learned that as well. Because he's talking about orphans, he's not talking about regular children. And there's a benefit take that all children should be given decent opportunities of having the toys and a good childhood. And this is Islam, this is our religion. It's bab adab, right? We're talking about. Imagine he didn't say, you're talking about your child or his child. He's talking about an orphan who doesn't have parents. So the guardian is actually looking for them in the way that is befitting to Allah. And then the author, he moves away from that towards clothing again. And he's talking about now the wearing of fur. He says, وَلَا بَأْسَ فِي اللُّبْسِ الْفِرَاءَ وَاشْتِرَائِهَا جُلُودَ حَلَالٍ مَوْتُهُمْ لَمْ يُوَطَّدِ. He says, there is no harm in wearing fur and buying it. And this is not, so now it's coming with asl first. There's no problem, he says, in wearing animal fur and buying it, provided the skin of the animal, so the hair which it is, or the skin from it, is what? An animal which is permissible to eat and who is not a dead animal. So the author, he put together two issues. One issue, wearing fur. Second issue, wearing the skin of animals. It's two issues. So on one issue, in Islam, wearing fur is something old. If you look at the Salaf, they used to wear fur. And some of them didn't like to wear it. So if you look at ulama, they mentioned there was this kind of old difference of opinion about wearing it. Not its origin, more to do with where did it come from, the source of it. Is it halal animal, haram animal? How was it slaughtered? So in Islam, the rulings here pertain to the wool and the fur and the feathers, all of these things. So asl is permissibility. Now someone will say, what about if it's an animal which is haram to wear? Or haram, for example, for me to own. So here the author, he doesn't talk about that, he talks about the julud, the skin. Because he connects the two together. So we'll talk about the fur first. Wearing fur in Islam is permissible. It's permissible. And for the most part, the ulama, they do not specify that the fur has to be only the animal which is permissible to eat, because the correct opinion is that the fur, feathers, nails, hair that comes from an animal, dead or alive, it's important, dead or alive, halal to eat or haram to eat is not najis. It's not najis. It's pure. And this is important because the scholars differentiate between skin and between bones, fur, and hair. In the Umd al-Fiqh class, we're going to talk about in more detail because it comes to do with the same issue about using the vessel made of it. So the julud, the skin of an animal, is that which has feeling. So the animals, they have skin, it has feeling, it has kind of what we call this ihsas, it has a feeling sensitivity, where hair, fur, and bones, these ones, they grow and then they break or they fall off and they grow again. So they're not the same chapter. And we're going to talk more on Saturday class. Two different things. So Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah mentioned, rahimahullah, other ulama, the hair of animals, the fur of animals, the nails of them, the bones of them. If you find them dead animals, and they dried up and they're left there, or they fell off the animal, like for example, some animal left some feathers, or the hair of the animal, you can use it, it's halal. This is a correct opinion, more correct opinion of ulama. Some of them, they try to attach it to the skin, but the skin is different than the hair and fur. So when it comes to wearing the winter jackets, I believe Abu Fajr, he posted something a long time ago about this issue. He talked about there, the ulama, what he mentioned about the skin or the fur of the animal. The fur is not like the skin aslan. Therefore, if you have a jacket, you have animal fur, it's halal. And we talked about this in the fiqh of food and drink as well, but we talked about the julud at that time, the skin. So here we're talking about the fur. And Ibn Rajab, he talks about it in Jami' al-Hikam as well, and other books, ulama, talk about it. Why are the differences? Someone may come and say, I don't know what animal it is. We said even if it's dead animal, Sahaba set up, they used to use the bones and the hair and the fur. So if someone has a raccoon or coyote or any of these kind of furs, it's no problem. It's a correct opinion of ulama, there's no problem. It's different than skin and meat that is cut from animal, because sometimes these two issues are mixed together. But he held the view that the julud halalin. But when it comes to the julud, the skin of an animal must be one which is halal to eat and must not be dead animal. And that's one of the two opinions we mentioned before. So fur is one issue, skin is a different issue. Now if someone says, okay, can I wear a snake skin jacket? It's a different issue than saying, can I wear a winter jacket with an animal fur? Two different issues. So when it comes to skins, most of the fuqaha, they hold the view, it has to be the skin of an animal halal to eat. Halal to eat. So it must be an animal which you're allowed to eat. Camel, leather like a cow, right? Buffalo, whatever. Any of those animals are allowed to eat. And it must be slaughtered. It can't be dead. Even though there's a difference now. What if it was dead and then you tanned it? So the ulama, they say it should not be dead. But if it was dead and then we tanned the dead skin and it's allowed to eat that animal asl, they say that one's halal. What they exempted, most of the fuqaha, is the wild animals. That one. So at the end, the fuqaha, the majority say skins of animals which are halal to eat are permissible to wear. You should slaughter them first, then skin the animal and use it, the hide. But if you found a dead animal, you skin the hide, and it's already dead, and you benefit from it, then there's evidence to show it's permissible. But what about the sibaa', the wild animal? Or the birds, the hawks and eagles, all these kind of things, snakes, crocodile, the khilaf among the ulama. Right? Two opinions. One opinion is that it's not allowed, another opinion it's allowed. Right? You have evidence on both sides. Right? For the time, we're not going to go into it, but you can see there's both views. So depending on what someone takes as their view, and I believe we touched on a little bit in the fiqh of food and drink, that some of the ulama, they say that you can never purify them. And maybe in the Saturday class we'll talk about you can't purify animals which are haram to eat. Their skin can't be purified. Because they say tanning purifies it. But the other scholars said no. What only can purify is the halal animals. It's a khilaf. There's a hadith, Ibn Abbas, Sahih Muslim, Abu Dawood, we mentioned ayyu dibagh, any kind of skin. And if it's tanned, faqat tahur, then it becomes pure. But then they try to restrict it and say that's talking about any halal one, etc. There's evidences. I'm not going to go into both sides here, but you get the point. So some people, you see them, due to this, they wear certain exotic animal skins, others won't. Depends on your view. But when it comes to the hair, the fur, the more correct opinions, all of it is allowed. Right? And this is something which, right, the scholars, again, they do have difference there, but that's the more correct opinion. But with this, based on this understanding, now the author adds on line 158, he says, وَكَاللَّحْمِ فِي الْأَوْلَى إِحْضَرًا الْجِلْدِ ثَعْلَبٍ وَعِنْهُ لِلْيُبْسِ وَالصَّرَاةِ بِهِ إِسْتُدِي. So now he connects two issues now. He says, an example is like the meat of the fox, which is prohibited according to one narration from Imam Ahmad. So you can't eat a fox, therefore it's haram to wear the skin of a fox. And why is it haram to eat a fox? Who remembers? Good. It has the canine and the fangs. We said that's one of the conditions the animal is prohibited if its animal has fangs. So a fox, even though it doesn't eat us, it eats other animals, it's a predator in its category. So it's an animal with fangs, haram to eat. Therefore, its skin will be haram according to the majority. But he says in another opinion, Imam Ahmed held the view, you can wear fox skin, but you shouldn't pray in it. So you can see here that even Imam Ahmed, he has more than one opinion. And they differentiated now between something which is haram in and of itself and haram getting into the salah. And so it's an issue that it's not only related to the clothing, but related to other things. So we'll give the classic example the fuqaha they give. Somebody stole a jacket. Then he goes to salah to pray. And he prays with the stolen jacket. Is the salah sahih? Sahihah? Some of you probably think, who steals a jacket and prays the salah? What kind of bad person is this? Right? But this is a good example of the fuqaha they always mention. It's honest thief, right? Make tawbah. But he stole the jacket. Now he's praying salah. Does the salah count? So the ulama have khilaf here. Where is the khilaf coming from? So on one side, many of us, we hold the view that salah counts. And that's the correct opinion because he's met all the conditions. What he stole is an action outside the salah. The other group of ulama, they say no. From the conditions salah is sitr awrah, covering the awrah. He stole something haram to wear, so his awrah is not fully covered or properly covered. So he has to pray again. Especially talk about a thobe. They're talking about a stolen garment. They're supposed to cover the awrah. So they say that you stole it, it doesn't count. Another example connected, someone comes and they stole a piece of land. Then they pray salah there. Salah count, same issue they have here. Your prayer and the stolen land. So the same thing here. I'm wearing something haram. According to ulama, let's say the one group of scholars hold the opinion that the fox skin is haram. I started my salah. My salah counts. So Imam Ahmed held the view, one second opinion, you can wear it, but shouldn't pray with it. And the argument from their side is impurity. So for this side, it's about impurity. For the other example I gave you, it's the idea of stolen goods. They fulfill the condition of covering the awrah. But here, if I just told you a few minutes ago that tanning the animal, skin of an animal which is a wild animal doesn't purify the skin, you're wearing najas. Can you pray salah and you have najasa? وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِرَ. Allah says clean your clothing. And tahara of the land, of clothing and the body is a must. So it didn't come with this. So the salah doesn't count. But also there's the worry that even if there's a khilaf there, safer to avoid. But if someone took the opinion that it's not najis and he actually holds the view it's permissible, then we cannot say that they're praying with najasa. But you understand now why they mention, why would Imam Ahmed have a view that you can wear but not pray with it. But the idea is that we understand in fiqh, the ulama mention usul, if someone does something haram, kharij amal, outside the action itself, it doesn't have any bearing on the validity of the other action. It's a principle usul, you study in more detail. Something which you do haram but is not part of the action, it's outside action, doesn't have bearing on the validity of that action. So if I stole, I get the sin for stealing, but I came with shurut al-salah, my salah will count. And that's why you have the example, many of us you probably heard before, someone went to Hajj with stolen money. The Hajj counts? So what do you guys think? Someone stole the money, robbed the bank, went for Hajj. Hajj counts? قالوا صحيح, it counts. But is it Hajj mabrur? Abadan. No, mabrur. You can't do that. But it counts. Why? Someone will say, how can it be? Because two different actions. His Hajj, he met all the conditions, right? But the money he got is haram. So he's going to get sin for that. And then his Hajj will count, but he's not going to get the reward of coming sinless. That's because he didn't come with the right way. That one he has to do nothing wrong. So we take the benefit that Islam has justice to this, but also doesn't open the door to that. Because somebody may think that that's the case, that we can just steal and go for Hajj. No. If you're stealing it, that's the last thing you should worry about the Hajj. Right? You should be worrying about it. But you can see why some people, unfortunately, shaitan, he does this. They say, well, they did a haram thing. They say, I'm going to make a Hajj. Yes, you can. But you think about that haram, something haram, Allah may not give you tawfiq to make Hajj at all. So the benefit we take from this, and we're going to stop at this point, the issue of the clothing and coming to purity is connected to the fiqh lessons we're doing on Saturday. So we're going to cover this, inshallah, as well there more. When it comes to the tahara of clothing, is a big deal. Because the tahara of clothing connects to it is the validity of the salah, and also other things like it. So for example, the validity of salah, the intifa', the benefit of that product. Because if you say it's najis, you can't benefit from it. Impure, you can't benefit from it. And etc., etc. So inshallah we'll end with this much. And the author, when he mentioned these examples, you can see from adab, a lot of the adab related issues, also sometimes the fiqh related issues. But nonetheless, they teach a lot about the nature of adab. The adab, some of it has to be based on learned rulings. And wallahi, in Islam we have so much adab. We learn, and this teaches us the depth of our religion, to encourage us to live the most righteous life. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made a Muslim charged with the responsibility of living a pure life, it's not without all these rules and the pattern to do it. Because other religions, they tell you, they can give you an example how to live a righteous life, but there's no details. There's no guidelines. How can you live a righteous life pleasing to Allah, and all you have is general verses? But in Islam, we have the general guidelines, the objectives of Sharia, principles of Sharia, detailed etiquette, halal and haram. Wallahi, this teaches us that a Muslim just learns every day one mas'ala, something new. He can become closer to Allah every day. Every day learning something new, and in every different chapter of his life. So some of these issues, like we said, to do with the renting houses, our clothing, what you're eating, what your toys for children, etc., etc. And inshallah, we'll end with this much. When the question says, is it also if eyes are stitched with a thread, is it okay to unstitch them to end up with a doll with no eyes? If the eyes are drawn, then using markers to cover them. So we said that it's the view of the Hanbalis that they shouldn't have a head. But when it comes to facial features, let's say someone has a toy that has this. You can argue that it's exempted. But if someone wanted to remove some of the eyes or remove some of the features to make it better, this is better, safer. And so if someone did this to make it easier and also to avoid any khilaf, this is the best. But if it's too difficult, then someone next time they buy toys, they buy the ones away from that. If you, for example, you look for the ones that have none of this in it. And this is always the safest. But if someone has a toy, it's too difficult to remove these things, then inshallah, the minute fuqaha, they permitted this to be used for the children under the age of puberty. But we also need to be careful that when we're buying these toys, we also need to take a deeper look at what they're offering. Alhamdulillah, like we said, there's lots of alternatives, so that's why the hajj is not as strong as it maybe used to be. But if someone had them and you can't remove them, inshallah, Allah forgives, there's no harm in that, because like we said, the fuqaha, they mentioned, but if you're able to, especially if it's like a doll, or you can remove the eyes, this is even better, right? Always to go with what's safer. But also in the future, when you're buying, now you try to buy the toys most appropriate. Alhamdulillah. And even when it comes to buying toys, there's more science to it than that. What kind of toys are beneficial should have benefit, right? And we encourage the parents as well that if they have any type of knowledge like this, to share with one another. Allahu a'lam. Anyone else have a question? Yes?
Can you repeat the principle again? So you mentioned that the last about the sin outside of the action not bearing.
So we said that when it comes to sin and prohibitions, if someone did an action or sin, kharij amal, it's outside of the action. So it's not to do with the mahiyya, the actual action itself. Not its conditions, not its pillars, it's outside of its nature. Example, somebody is praying salah and they have a stolen garment. Is any condition of salah here being affected? Any pillars? No. So it's an action haram outside. So they say the ulama, there's two different angles. Right? So when you study in usul, they mention 4 scenarios, and maybe when the fiqh class we're going to get to this because it's going to come up. But the issue is that I did something sinful outside the prayer, so my prayer will count, but I still get a sin for that. The same way I went for the hajj, my hajj counts, all the conditions are met, but I stole the money, so I'm going to get penalized for that if I don't repent, but my hajj still counts. But that doesn't mean now the person who did hajj, they did the best hajj. In fact, they need to make tawbah immediately because they've done it the wrong way. And that's why in Islam we don't believe in the bad principle. Right? Al-ghaya tubarrir wasila, that the ends justify the means. Islam's haram principle. Right? Because someone will say, if that's the case, then maybe, no. If even, you don't even know if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept your hajj, even though the ulama says la, because He knows your intention. So this is the principle, and we're going to cover it more later. Yes?
Just 2 things. Can you clarify, you said in the beginning about, did you say like bed sheets, images like cartoons, faces, that's okay? And the second one was drawing images with eyes, like, for school project, like if they're writing an essay or something, they have to have presentation, they have to draw trees and eyes, is that okay?
So there's 2 issues there. One of them is to do with the blankets. So we said Islamically, any image on a blanket or something on the rug and the floor is permitted. If it's an image of that which has a picture on it, because of the hadith, إِلَّا رَقْبًا فِي الثَّوْبِ, except for imprint on the clothing. Now the issue of the cartoons is a different issue because the scholars, they don't permit, many of them are discouraged of watching cartoons with children for other reasons. But if you said to me it's just an image, right? And the ulama actually talk about this, right? Because some people try to say it's not a real image, it's like something fake. Some of the fuqaha Shafi'iyya, they mention even if it's a fake image, human beings with wings, and still haram picture. But because the general permission to have pictures on garments and rugs, inshallah it can be exempted. Because many of the children's clothing, they have this. This is the problem. Many of them have bees and little small things. So there's no problem because on the rug it's on a blanket. But when it comes to clothing, not allowed. So it has to be something which they say is debased, it's humiliated. You're going to rely on it, turn it over, put it on the floor. When it comes to drawing in school pictures, the children should try their best to avoid them. Because now, this is the problem that when you're in school, many of the class work, especially art, they encourage, or sometimes other classes, media work, you have to have images. So many classes, they may tell you that you should have image, but they don't specify image with the head. So you try your best. I know some students, they were in a photography class, they never took a picture of the head. I mean, they did a whole even film without a head in there. And they passed the class, they did well. So it's not a must. You have to be creative, yes, but you can avoid it. But the idea is, as Muslims, we don't also want to compromise our beliefs and say, I have to draw, they're forcing me. Because they're not really forcing you. Especially because at the end, children, we also know that the parents should tell the kids how to do it and also give them the guidelines that, look, you do your best to use as much things to avoid that. And inshallah, if they take marks for them, tawakkal Allah. It's not going to, if you didn't do well in art, it doesn't necessarily affect the fact that you did something which Allah is pleased with. And wallahi, we've even seen those who did it consciously, they got sometimes very good marks. They have no haram. So it's very important that we don't legalize it and try to make it something light. Wallahu a'lam. Yes?
So, could you play, a video game with a person with a head? Could you play it, but they're, not, they don't look realistic?
So that's a good question. What about the video games there where there's actually a figure, a human being there? You're playing with a person with the head in there. A sports player playing soccer. So many of the ulama, when they look in this, there's, of course, two opinions there amongst our scholars. One opinion amongst the scholars is that the general ruling now, playing games, there's rules and regulations. And one of them, they say they shouldn't have anything haram in it. So one group of scholars say any images, including games that have images, for example, video games, is haram. Another group of scholars say it's halal. Again, because they say this is for kids. Going back to the issue for the kids. And secondly, they said that even if you're playing the game, you're not necessarily owning these things and this thing can be turned off. It's not the same as the other image, which is like something drawn and you have in your hand or on the wall. So they say that it's a lighter kind of prohibition. Try to avoid games that have bad things in it, but some of them they say explicitly that it's allowed. Because what they understood is that for children, for entertainment, and the person can turn it off. It's like viewing other images on YouTube and the internet like this. So there's this opinion. So if someone says then it's allowed with that guidance, now comes to the content of the game. So this is important because the ulama who say it's allowed, then they say, but it has to be halal game. You're not supposed to do anything haram in the game. So inshallah there is an opinion for that. Again, because children are playing it mainly. Even adults, if they're playing the game with their kids or something, they have to be making sure that they try to find the best of the games. And also it should be turned off and it's done, etc., etc. And maybe another time we could talk about those guidelines. Because the fuqaha, they actually have written and they explain the etiquette and the fiqh of the games. Not just video games, all games. And it's very, very important because, as we see in our society today, either you play or you don't play. And when you play everything. There's no rules. And this is very dangerous. But if a parent also should try their best if they're worried about, because again, we have to be careful that sometimes we start with this and we end up somewhere bad. Pick the things where there's no fitna. Racing games. They play car games, alhamdulillah. They have the other games, more skill games. Play those games. Those are better for you and also better for your brain. Right? And there's always to avoid it, but there are two views amongst the scholars, and again, we can explain them in more detail another time. But this is the thing, if someone, for the children is different than the adults, right? We have to also, generally, right, that's a different chapter too. Should all the adults supposed to be playing games? That's a different topic, right? But again, this is wallahu a'lam. Wallahu a'lam, yes.
So in the case of a picture, and people blur the eyes, what's the case in those ones?
So that's a good question. Someone has a picture and they blur the eyes. So we mentioned before, I think that's on Torah Da'wah, that the scholars have a different opinion about how you efface or erase a picture. So one opinion was you have to erase the entire head. That's one opinion. Because of the hadith of Abbas, a picture is a head. If you take away the head, it's no longer a picture. And this, no doubt, is the safest view. Second opinion, you change the facial features. So some ulama, Shaykh Uthaymin, amongst them, if you take away the eyes, or you take away the nose or the mouth, or you take the head and you put a foot, then it's not a picture. Something like this. And he's not the only one who said it. Some scholars in the past said it. So what they meant by this is that this is not what it looks like anymore. You made it look like totally different. So there is an opinion like this. But now between these two opinions, which is the safer one? If you have an image somewhere and you can just remove the whole head, this is the best. But if it's not your picture, or it's a picture Sharia allowed to have, like documentation, money, this is of course exempted. But let's say you have a picture of just something random. If you don't need it, throw it away. But if you need it, or something you can do one of those ways. But the best is to remove the head if able. This is the best because Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was commanded by Jibreel when he came to his house and he saw the images on the screen to make it look like a tree. Which means he took the head away and makes its hand look like a tree, and this is the safest. But there is a view like that, the ulama mentioned, yes.
So in the case of robbing, a guy that robs money or whatever, and then chooses to pay zakat or perhaps give sadaqah. I know you said the sin is outside of the actual action itself, but what's the case in that? Does it go with the same thing?
Well, yeah, in Islam, like obviously with Robin or whatever, or anyone like him who steals money and gives zakat from it. In Islam, that's not how it do it. Inna Allah tayyibun la yaqbalu illa tayyiba. Allah is all good and pure. He doesn't accept that which is except pure. So we know in Islam, if someone did this theoretically, then yes, someone's zakat. Let's give a better example because we don't want people doing this. Stealing the money and giving zakat. Yeah, we're laughing, but there are some cases that happen. Some, na'udhu billah, people, maybe shaitan tricked them. They think this is good. But let's give a better example. Somebody who made money haram way. Haram way, they did a haram thing. They won a casino, went to a casino, won a lottery. And now he's going to take his money and give it to the masjid. Or he's going to give it to you. And this money, the person he stole it, or so like he earned it haram way, can he give it to you? And there's also another issue connected to it. Someone did something haram money and they give it to the poor. So the fuqaha, they look and they analyze this issue in detail. And like you said, and sometimes there's rules. The money can be accepted. Obviously not the masjid is not going to accept that, but let's say a poor person. And other times they can't. There's rules. But now if someone, let's say, did this, sold the money, and then they gave us zakat. At the end of the day, the money is stolen, the zakat is already eligible on the money anyways. If it was sold, if the owner who got it back or you who stole it has to pay zakat. But is this the way to give sadaqah with a sadaqah account? Right? Can a poor person benefit from it? Some conditions, yes. But the person who's stealing, what benefit is it? Of giving something which is stolen, which Allah is not pleased with, to get hasanat. What kind of hasanat are you going to get? And that's unfortunately the problem today, because with some people, they're analyzing the end result, they're not looking at the way of doing it. So we have to remember Allah tells us in the Quran how we're supposed to earn our rizq, how we're supposed to give our things. Halalan tayyiba. Has to be halal in and of itself, tayyiban, how it's earned. And this is the biggest problem, because sometimes people translate tayyiban as wholesome. That's what it means literally, but tayyiban means the tariqah, how did you get the money? So it has to be both. So Rabbun, if you get a halal money, but it's not tayyiban, it's haram. And that's the problem, like you said, even our kids, when we watch this stuff, we didn't even realize what he's doing. We like it, what he's doing, because he thinks he's helping the poor. And later on you realize he's robbing the rich. Because later, if Allah made us rich, we'll never be happy with him. All right? Allah protect us from this. Any other questions related to this? Otherwise, I don't want to delay the time. Yes? So it's a good question. Now, cow leather, cow hide, most of the products we use leather. If the animal, does it have to be slaughtered Islamically or slaughtered at all, or can it be dead? So we said the correct opinion then is, if the animal is halal to eat, its hide is allowed to be used, whether you slaughtered it, which is the correct way, Islamically, and you benefit from the hide, or a non-Muslim slaughtered it in their way, which is Islamically acceptable, or they just is dead. You can still benefit from it. Because they say that in any case, if the animal is allowed to eat, if it was tanned, back in the day, the way they used to tan it, they used to put salt and keep in the sun to dry it out, but now they have it's much more chemical. And so some ulama said that the tanning today is even more cleaning and purified and fast. If it's tanned, it becomes pure, period. So it's allowed to use. So we don't have to investigate what happened to the cow. If it's been dead or slaughtered, we don't have to. Now, if somebody would say, and we'll finish with this because this is a point that needs to be addressed separately, what if the cow was abused? And the cow was mistreated and then it was slaughtered or died? Some people now, they take an ethical approach and they make a tahreem of something halal based on ethical opinion. All Muslims agree that you're not supposed to torture animals And you're not supposed to produce their hides in that method. But that doesn't make the hide haram. This is the question. Big difference between halal and haram and what is better. No one endorses the animals to be treated this way. But we cannot also boycott, as we find today people, the whole fur industry, the entire leather industry, and the arguments that it's being mistreated. This is not Islamic, because Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's wearing these things. Did he check the sources the way you are? The Prophet feared Allah the most. You can't be better than him, alayhi salatu wasalam. And so the Sahaba, whenever this creeped up, this idea, if you read Ibn Rajab, if you encourage brothers to go to Jami' ibn Hikam, I believe Hadith 30 something, and there he talks about this issue, how the Salaf differed about the fur and the different clothing. He talks about how some of them, they were worried about the origins of their clothing. And some of them, they dispelled and said, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't do that. And that's the best way to approach it. But we're not going to move away from the issue and deny that there's torture going on or abuse, and Islam is against that. But today, if you open or buy shoes or something, you don't have to check the label and go online and source the factory and find out what it's. By that time, you won't wear anything. You're not going to wear anything. And this is very important. But inshallah, one day we'll talk about those issues, because it does affect our community, and some people have certain doubts. جزاكم الله خير. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.